So for this video, I'm just going to have a very quick look at the shader that I created for this tunnel, and then after that at the shader that I created for the object in the middle. Now, these are sort of two different ways to approach the same type of look, and I just want to show you both ways you could do it. So the first one in this tunnel you see has this sort of technical like texture. I just threw an HDR in the background so you could have a look at the reflections and how it all works. And a lot of my shaders tend to be fairly simple. I try to keep them as simple as possible so they're easy to reuse, and you know, they're just easy to understand when you open the files as well. You could go into super detail, and a lot of the techniques that I explain, you could just add them or double them or triple them and just keep adding more and more I guess more and more detail to them. But this first tunnel is actually fairly simple. Generally what I do is when I unwrap this kind of stuff, especially if it's just all very straight geometry, I'll just select everything, hit U, and then Smart UV project it. So if you have a very quick look at the unwrap, they're not great unwraps. I mean, they're not amazing. If you want to really unwrap something properly, then you'll have to spend more time than just hitting one single button the way I do. But I don't mind it. The thing is, especially if you look at the end result, it's fairly dark and you can't really see whether the unwrap is perfect or not. So that's why I like to use the Smart Unwrap very quickly, especially on straight objects, like very square objects. It works quite well. So I'm just going to hit the Shift-C key again just to show you. So we have this sort of very intricate looking pattern, and you might think, geez, that might be a lot of work or whatever, but this first technique is actually by just using very simple images from the public domain that look really interesting, and rather than using them as a diffuse map, I tend to use them as a glossy map or a displacement map, or a bump map rather, because I don't really have micro displacement turned on in this one, I believe. So if I'm going to go into the editor, I'm just going to grab this. This is a public domain image. If you type, I think I typed in like public domain circuit board or something into Google, and this is one of the first ones that popped up, and by itself it's not really the most interesting image, but it has some really nice sort of detail built into it. And what I like doing is, like I said, just grabbing these and using them in the node editor. So I just have a very simple image texture node here with that image loaded in, and hopefully this will be somewhat visible. If I just set this to rendered again, there we go. So the first thing that I do is this color ramp, I just grab it and I just sort of tone it down a little bit and make sure I can control my reflection. So anything that's dark isn't going to be reflecting, and anything that's lighter is going to be reflecting more. Now you could push these color values up more and you could experiment with this, but it all depends on your image obviously and the exact look you're trying to get. And this is a very simple mix shader, so I have a dark diffuse with a little bit of roughness and layer weight with a fairly high value to get this very sort of metallic looking shader. Now if I just take away the color component here, you'll see it's just glossy all over. So I'm going to take away the roughness as well. This is the base shader, and as you can see it reflects quite hard. I tend to turn down reflections a little bit sometimes to get more interesting results, but obviously your mileage may vary. Now if I just pipe in the first one, the color, you can see there's already a lot of detail being added in, and the color of the gray tones that I set here is actually affecting the way the reflections are colored as well. So this is really nice just to get some really interesting things going on. Now I'm going to turn off this displacement for a second. It's not really doing much, but I'll show you in just a minute why it's important. Now the second one, if I bring down the color here and put in the roughness, you'll see we see that same pattern popping up, but it's actually using those values to roughen up parts of the reflection. So if we combine these together and get a way more intricate looking pattern very, very quickly without having to do a lot of work. Now because it's just all UV'd, if you want this pattern to be smaller, then you can just tone it down, and again you get more detail. The only thing you've got to watch out for though is that you make sure that the tiling doesn't become too obvious, like certain shapes will start popping up again and again. But again, it's all dependent on your camera angle, so be sure to visit your camera view quite often to make sure that it doesn't look all that repetitive. So here I can see a few things. I don't know if it'll be obvious enough in the recording, but you just keep an eye out for that and maybe scale it up and scale it down. You can mix two maps together as well. as well without too much issue to sort of alleviate that a little bit. I'm going to turn this back up a little bit again so we can see what we're doing. I believe it was set to 15. Again, these aren't magic numbers or anything. Just grab whatever works for you. So looking at it here, the last thing that I did as well is add in a bump map. Now this might not seem to do much on the surface, but if we just exaggerate this, then you can see the light will start catching on the edges of these bumps, and you get even more detail in these sort of intricate patterns because they're being pushed outwards or they're being pushed inwards depending on how you set it up. You get the edges of the bump sort of catching the light and creating all these extra highlights, which means it's more extra detail as well. Because if we go look in here now, I'm just going to create a very simple light and see if that will do anything. Move it back. No, doesn't seem to be working with me. Where is it? There we go. It should be in the middle now. Let's see if that does anything. It might not, but there we go. So this is what I was trying to explain. If I put the light in here, if you just have the reflection of the light, it's really not doing that much. And by adding in these bump maps, you get all these really nice sort of highlighting edges. So if I were to turn this off, actually, sorry, disconnect this, then you can see it's still there, but having this piped in and really exaggerating it, you can see there's a lot more detail coming in even to the darker parts. So this is a really good technique to snazz up those renders. And as you can see, if you look up close, then yeah, obviously the UV isn't great, but I have a particle system on this as well, which I forgot to mention in the modeling video. Just a few little extra bits and bobs. All it adds, I have a little bit of extra color. I'm going to select one of them here. I'm using the same map even with a different scaling and just more of a golden color. So we break up the colors of the larger object itself with that particle system. So that way you can get these really, really interesting and intricate looking results without having to do a lot of work really. I would encourage you to open up the source file and look around and poke around in it and see, if there's stuff there that interests you. Again, all of this is Creative Commons on the Blender Cloud, so if you want to reuse some of these assets, feel free to do so. I don't mind at all. In fact, I would encourage it if it is a bit of a time saver for you. So for the second object now, I'm going to switch over to this singular object in the middle, and this is sort of the same idea behind it. The only thing that's different about it, and I'm actually going to change the strength of my HDR a little bit here so we can see what we're doing so it's not all blown out. There we go, it's a little bit better. Let me turn it down just a bit. There we go. So as you can see, we have a very similar pattern, although this one is a little more square. This is an asset I reused from something else I made recently as well. Just wanted to drop it in. This is a really interesting texture setup. As you can see, this one is a little bit more advanced. But it boils down to the same thing. If we deconstruct this, then again, it's just a mix shader. Now, there's two mix shaders here. One is sort of mixing in the metal and black reflective material, and the other one is mixing in the glass material that you can see sort of in between. So this adds an extra layer. I like doing this kind of stuff because, like I said, it adds an extra layer of detail. We have this glowing core in the middle. I believe it's just an emission shader, and I like setting these to be fairly heavy on the saturation, so you have to set them up pretty high. But you can get these really nice, rich, colorful lights, and it looks really, really good, especially combined with a different shader. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. Especially if you combine it with a different shader, and especially something like glass, which is a little bit rough on the inside, and you get these really, really interesting results of this glowing object. Like I said, I try to keep all this stuff fairly simple. This is probably one of the more advanced shaders in this series. So let's have a look. So apart from the first mix, which mixes the glass and the sort of metal or black plastic type thing, whatever you want to call it, let's have a look at just that shader to begin with. So I'm going to pipe this in, and this is the end result of that shader. And it looks really interesting, and it has this really sort of nice technical looking pattern. And honestly, I just achieved this by mixing a bunch of brick textures. So if I grab the first one, I believe this one is used to mix in the glass. So as you can see, if I hit the color ramp here, everything that's white will be the black reflective texture, and everything that's black will be the glass texture because it's mixing that in. So that's the first brick texture I used. And then for the second one, I believe this is a brick texture combined with a checker texture. So the reason I do it like this is the checker texture is actually distorting the UV vector of the brick texture. And I mean, obviously you can do all kinds of stuff in here. You can experiment with this. This isn't necessarily right or wrong. But it does give a really interesting distortion to, like I said, the brick texture itself. So I pipe this into a color ramp as well. And again, all I'm doing is just using this to change the roughness. So let's see, let's hunt for a bit of reflection here. And you can see there's a very minor difference in roughness if you look at some of these parts. So that just gives it a little bit of extra detail. And whenever I'm shading, something that's really, really important to keep in mind is not just what is your object supposed to look like, but what story is it telling? Is it new? Is it old? Has it been through a lot of stuff? Is there dust on it? Is there grime on it? Is there, is there imperfections on it? And I try to make even the most perfect objects look a little bit imperfect. Because the way I like to think about it is a lot of the surface detail is something that our eyes pick up, but a lot of this really tiny sort of detail where, you wouldn't really look at this and go, oh, wow, this surface is really, really diverse or whatever. You see it as one surface, but there's still a lot of detail going on here. So there's something I like to call brain detail. So it's these little, how should I say this? It's these little details that your eyes aren't picking up, but your brain is registering. It's telling you the story of the object, like I said before. It's like, this has been through some stuff. It's not quite as perfect and as finished as it looks at first glance. And that's a really great way to approach shading, is to just sort of look at these objects and say, okay, has this been through something? Is it new? Is it old? And sort of go from there and see what layers you can add on top of it. And a lot of this stuff you can do very simply by just adding the roughness. Now, if you look at the final one as well, I have the same brick texture in the displacement slot. So that means both the glass and the black reflective texture is being displaced, or being, using the bump texture as well. So again, if I were to exaggerate this, you can see looks all right. You get a lot of detail. I tend to turn this down fairly low because you don't need a lot, and when you turn it down a little bit lower, not every single highlight is going to get this little, or not every single bump line is going to get this little highlight, which is great because it adds more diversity into it. And then when the object turns and the light reveals a lot of this surface, you get a lot of stuff that's changing and maybe flickering a little bit, but in a good way. I don't mean flickering as in noise, and if you turn, if you grab something that's close to you right now and you turn it around, you'll see there's a lot of little notches and scratches where the light catches it in just a certain way. And if you really exaggerate bump, then the light tends to catch every single bump on it. And if you tone it down a little bit, it just catches a few of them, some of the more major ones. And then when the light really shines on it and you get a really nice angle looking into it, you get a very, very nice result. So you get a lot of variation from angle to angle as well, which is really important to think about. So again, this is fairly simple. I've gone a lot further with this as well. I've put brick texture and brick texture and brick texture, and yeah, procedurals can get a little bit slow, but I like working with procedural textures a lot because I don't have to jump over to GIMP or Krita or Photoshop or whatever you're using to repaint and then export it and bring it back in. With procedurals, you tend to see the result instantly, and it creates some really, really cool patterns if you're not afraid to mess around. Like I said, this technique of adding in this checker texture and the vector of the UV for the brick texture, it's not really meant for that kind of stuff, but if it looks cool, it looks cool. Like, don't worry about it too much. So that's it for the shading section of this technique video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and yeah, if you like these, then definitely check out the other technique videos.